Outside of food, water, and shelter, I would argue relationships are the most important aspect of our lives. They give us purpose, they give us a reason to get out of bed in the morning, but they can also be our biggest source of stress and anguish. The health of our relationships is directly related to the communication patterns we use within them. Healthy communication involves I statements such as, I feel X when you do Y. Alternatively, toxic communication usually falls into one of four categories. It's criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. Now, like most of you, I've had my share of relationships. Most have been fulfilling, but some have been toxic and destructive. It's not until I get out of a toxic relationship, though, that I can truly recognize the destructive patterns we were engaged in. With a wife and daughter that I love more than anything, I'd like to guarantee that we don't fall into some of those same patterns. So in this selfish endeavor, I hope to pass on some of the knowledge that I've gained while studying destructive communication patterns. The first destructive communication pattern we need to examine is criticism. To start, we must understand what criticism means and what it looks like. Criticism is attacking your partner's character or personality instead of a behavior that upset you. If we think about a partner who's late for a date, healthy communication would sound like, I feel unappreciated when you are late to our dates. Alternatively, criticism would be a statement like, you don't care about anyone but yourself. When someone criticizes their partner, it is often the result of poor coping mechanisms or low emotional intelligence. Criticism can be thought of as the immature version of our next destructive communication pattern. This is known as contempt. Contempt is a complete disappointment and disregard for your partner. It's more destructive than criticism, though, because while criticism is attached to a behavior, contempt is usually an attack on your partner's very existence. According to John Gottman, as presented in our textbook, contempt is the single best predictor for divorce. And unlike criticism, contempt doesn't have to be explicitly stated. Of course it can be, with statements like, my life would be so much better without you. But more often, it's communicated through nonverbal cues, like eye rolling or a condescending tone of voice. When a partner is faced with criticism and contempt, they may rightfully feel attacked and respond with the next destructive communication pattern. This response is called defensiveness. Before we examine the tit for tat that can occur, we must first define what defensiveness is. A person becomes defensive when they feel attacked, and instead of articulating those emotions in a healthy way, they respond with a counterattack to defend their own self-worth. Our criticism example of, you don't care about anyone but yourself. A defensive person would respond with their own attack, like, you're the one who blew all our money at the casino. So as we've seen, defensiveness is often a response to criticism and contempt. And while it's understandable why a person would feel defensive when they're attacked, it doesn't negate the reality that both communication styles are destructive. So this continuous attack and defend that can occur will often lead to escalatory or avoidance spirals. It's thought of as both partners are feeding the flames that will engulf their relationship. Now, while the three communication patterns we've examined so far are outward and potentially aggressive, our final communication pattern is more passive, but just as destructive. This style is called stonewalling. Stonewalling is a type of avoidance behavior where one partner refuses to engage with the other. It can be thought of as the silent treatment. It can be something as relatively small as refusing to engage in a conflicted topic, or it could be as broad as refusing to acknowledge your partner's entire existence. This could be thought of as ghosting. And even though it's relatively passive, it sends a clear message to your partner. And that message is, you're not worth the mental or emotional energy. Before too long, the partner will start to realize and believe that the person stonewalling doesn't care or value their relationship anymore. As we've seen, These 4 destructive communication patterns can have devastating emotional repercussion. It is important to keep this in mind when we communicate with our partners. So today we've examined 4 destructive communication patterns. John Gottman refers to these as the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Again, that's criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. Like the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, it preempts the biblical apocalypse. And just like that, the 4 horsemen of destructive communication patterns can predict the end of our relationships with devastating accuracy. To combat this, psychologist Mei Su states in her article, the 4 horsemen toxic communication styles and how to rein them in. It's not enough to just acknowledge these destructive patterns. In order for the relationship to survive, they must be replaced with positive, healthy communication patterns. So hopefully this has given you a good starting point to examine your own communication patterns in your relationships. If you'd like to learn more, you can visit the Gottman Institute's website at gottman.com. I'd like to thank you for your time and your attention today. And seriously, please examine your relationship's communication patterns so you don't fall victim to the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse.